and welcome to the Money Show, your one-stop destination for all your personal finance queries. I'm Kavita Thaplial, and today we have a very interesting discussion in the first half of the show where we'll be talking about increasing medical inflation, with medical inflation topping somewhere around 14 to 15% and your medical bills also shooting up. What should be your strategy going ahead? How much will you increase your medical insurance cover? Is it the time to even start building up a medical emergency fund? We'll get that plan for you through our experts, and the second half of the show we'll be answering your portfolio queries live. Just in case you have any question, you can WhatsApp us your queries on 865-797-4571. You can also email us your questions on the money show at etnow.tv. So a great lineup of content coming up ahead, but then let's begin the show. And since COVID-19, India has been witnessing a surge in healthcare cost inflation, resulting into making assured and standardized healthcare unviable for several sections of society and pushing up health insurance premiums. Now, we have seen a medical inflation high to up to 14%, which a lot of experts think is not sustainable. And the regulator too has red flagged a lot of issues on the same lines. Now, private health insurance players too have taken cognizance of this situation. They have introduced innovative products by adding more features, etc. But the question is it enough? Is insurance cover enough to have all medical emergencies covered, or one should look at having an extra cushion in the form of medical emergency fund? So let's discuss more on this, and I have with me Amit Chhabra, CBO, General Insurance, PolicyBazaar.com, and I have Harsh Rungta, founder, Fee Only Investment Advisors, and I'll be also joined by Rupinder Singh, Vice President of Retail Health Echo. Well, good evening, both of you. And Amit, let's get a sense of this medical inflation that's rising up. I know we've discussed this a lot of time on the show also. It's not that the regulator is not working on this direction. Retailer has spoken to the players, especially for senior citizens. They have also introduced a capping. Looking at the importance of health insurance is something that you really cannot ignore. But then I want to understand the kind of innovation and add-ons that we are getting in health insurance. Are the premiums justified? Even if one is ready to pay that high premium, looking at in medical inflation, is it justified to buy those kind of products?
Sure. See, you have to look at everything in context. So as you were looking at healthcare inflation across India and other countries, I think it's also important to look at two other factors. One is how is the healthcare cost in India compared. The other point also to look at is what is the cost of health insurance in India compared to other countries. So India historically has been an
Over here.
extremely low cost.
Okay. Yeah, sure. We were not just getting your feed correctly. So yeah, continue. Please continue. Yeah.
So the other important thing to look at is the cost of health insurance in India. India is one of
Technical issue. Amit, I would request you to join back again. But then till then, let's talk to Harsh Rungta. Harsh, the same question to you. What are your views?
So I think clearly, as far as the medical inflation is concerned, uh, obviously the fact that it is high is very uh, important. It has a lot of significance for all of us, not just senior citizens, for all of us. But the bigger, I think, issue is the lack of regulation of the healthcare sector. Whilst the health insurance sector is regulated, they obviously don't control the healthcare sector. And I think the regulator for the healthcare sector, which they may not be able to control inflation, nobody is asking about price controls and things like that. That can be disastrous for any sector. What that might do is that it might bring in transparency. And that will help tame inflation to some extent. Some amount of medical inflation is there the world over, and
I'll
I
have to
think
stop you over
as
here because we need to understand what kind of transparency and how it will help the inflation also come down then.
so I never understood how you can have prices that are different depending on the type of room that you are in. I can understand room rent should be high. Okay, because if you are in a single room, if you are in a big room, the room rent can be high. I can understand. Why would the test charges more? Why would implements be charged more? I don't really see, why that is there. One, why is there? I mean, at the end of the day, in a hospital, there would be some 10,000 stock keeping units, maybe 15,000. Okay, I mean that's nothing for the kind of retail trade that we do in India. Why can't there be a price list that is available? Why don't I know the price in advance of what I will pay for? If I use a certain type of, uh, you know, certain type of equipment, certain type of X medicine, X consumable, what will be the price? So, I mean, that I think is such a basic thing which is completely missing in India. And, the poor patient has become a sort of a pawn in this battle that is going on, and correctly so. I mean, the insurance industry also cannot pay for the healthcare sector. Similarly, healthcare sector has issues with the insurance industry. The patient, even after taking insurance, sort of becomes a volleyball between the
Absolutely.
two players. But I think the other gentlemen are far
Sure.
better equipped to talk about
Sure.
that.
Amit, can you hear me now? Do you really want to add? And yeah, your point earlier also that if we compare it with other economies, we are better or we are higher in terms of medical inflation?
Sure. In terms of medical inflation, we may be higher, but you have to also look at the absolute number, right? So in terms of what was the cost earlier, what was the cost, let's say, what was the cost in India compared to say other countries? India is significantly cheap still. That's one. And the second point I was trying to say was the cost of health insurance also is significantly lower in India when you look at the cost here versus other, I would say, developing markets. Let's leave out the US, UK, or the developed economies. But
That we really need a lot of streamlining that Harsh also was mentioning, because that's really going to get the inflation significantly down then if that really happens, which I'm sure the regulator is working on also.
see, so I just want to actually address the elephant in the room. There's a lot of talk about health insurance prices increasing, but actually, if you look at the numbers, the CAGR, over the last 10 years, on an average, the prices are not increasing that much. Some customers do see a lot of price increases, and that typically creates a lot of noise. Some customers are right in that sense, but largely the market is on an average seeing only about 10% inflation in health insurance premiums. So I think one must look at an overall view of what's happening in the market, and not, I would say, not look at the edge cases where, let's say, there's a 30%, 50% price increase. Yes, that happens, but that's only a very, very small amount of customers who see a very large price increase. In fact, our data suggests that only about 10% of the consumers see more than 30% price increase,
Really?
and only about
So this
5% of
has
the consumers.
even senior citizens. This data also includes senior citizens.
Yes, this includes everybody. This includes
Okay.
every,
I think
people.
Rupinder Jeet also has some data and some kind of a survey data points to share with us. How much do you agree with this data point and the facts that being stated by both of our panelists? Rupinder Jeet?
I'll come to the data points a little while after, but at the same time, I tend to agree with what my colleague is also sharing. See, healthcare inflation in India with insurance or without insurance still remains at 10 to 14%. It has been the same case for the last 15 odd years, many years. Essentially, there is no central authority to regulate the costs of treatments across hospitals, and at the same time, the kind of procedures which get done for insurance or non-insurance customers. There is what essentially is missing in India is the kind of standardization which needs to happen for different kinds of healthcare procedures across cities, probably across procedures, so that there is some bit of standardization which happens. Even though 10 to 14% inflation remains in healthcare, if you actually take up data across the industry, across insurance products, insurance companies over the last 15 odd years have increased their prices probably 15 to 20% every 3 years, wherein healthcare inflation is 10 to 14% every year. So from that point of view, there is a lot of shock absorption which happens by the insurers, and at the same time gives predictability to the people who are adopting health insurance. Within that framework, it also protects them for any unforeseen situation, and at the same time, we still remain a very if I were to use the words like, we are still very cheap comparable to other developing countries in terms of the cost for a health insurance product.
All right. Harsh, you're again, so we come down to this debate. Now, let's not talk about other economies and the way we are performing as compared to them. We are cheaper than major other emerging markets. But having said that, we can still feel the pinch. Amit, you mentioned that there's only 10% of policyholders or insured people who feel the pinch of 30% rise. I think that's the data that you pointed out, right? I also want to understand what kind of penetration are we talking about health insurance, when it comes to health insurance, and how much percentage of that data is just 10% of it who's feeling the pinch of this medical inflation? Amit.
See, if you talk about penetration, India, today has, to the best of estimates, about 6 odd crores of retail health insurance policies, is what the number, at the best estimate. If you look at, in terms of the number of people covered on an average, you would assume about 15 crore odd people are covered, which essentially means only about, 10 odd % of India has voluntary health insurance today. Now, this number, honestly sounds absurdly low because ideally more people should have health insurance. Now, if you break this down further, there will probably be 3 categories. There is a large chunk of the middle class, which does not have a health insurance policy of their own, and they rely on some or the other policies that's been provided to them. So it could be a corporate policy, for example. It could be government provided health insurance like CGHS or, one of the state schemes that are there. Or, so that's one category. The other very big category is, people below a certain income segment in the country, which are now covered by Ayushman Bharat. That's to the best of estimates, right around, that's around 40 to 50 crore people are covered in that segment. But even if you leave that aside, there is still probably, 70, 80 crores of the so-called middle class or, probably lower middle class, which is actually which is not insured on their own. Now the problem is, till you are, let's say, employed somewhere, you have a government provided insurance policy or a corporate policy, it's okay. The problem is what happens in the future,
right?
And the problem is, let's say you retire, at that point you already have contracted some illnesses. At that point it becomes, almost very, very tough to get a health insurance policy of your own. So I think for the health insurance industry in general, I think solving affordability is a massive, I would say, objective right now. How can you make health insurance more affordable?
Absolutely.
And I will come to how it can be done. There are a few ways of doing it.
Sure.
One thing I think our esteemed regulator did a couple of years back. They've now told every insurance company to offer EMIs when it comes to buying health insurance plans. So if, let's say, my premium costs 12,000 rupees, instead of paying 12,000 rupees in upfront, I would rather pay 1,000 rupees every month. We now, at Policy Bazaar, we now see 1/3 of all our consumers buying on EMIs.
Okay.
That does make health insurance significantly affordable. That's just one part of it.
Sure.
The other thing is now, increasingly we're seeing a lot of interesting innovation that's happening around health insurance in terms of one, limited network products. So I'll explain what that means. Let's say if you stay in Delhi NCR, today a full comprehensive product allows you to go to any hospital in the country. You can go to Medanta, you can go to Fortis, you can go to Max, or you can go to a relatively smaller, secondary care hospital as well.
Right.
The cost of getting treated at the large hospitals is very, very high, and that is what pinches the PNL of an insurance company eventually.
Right.
So instead, what we offer to consumers is a plan which is 20-30% cheaper, but it says that you can only go to certain hospitals and not go to, let's say, a Medanta as an example. Or we say that you cannot go to a single room in a hospital. You can go to a general ward in a hospital.
Sure.
So all of these brings down the cost significantly, and it helps increase the penetration further.
Right. So, Harsh, now keeping all this in mind, we are also working towards having this kind of insurance cover cashless. Harsh, do you think this can really help the players and also the policy holders?
one thing we must realize, health insurance is almost a basic human right. Okay, so I think elsewhere in the world, elections are won and lost on health insurance. You look at the American elections, etc., and the day is not far off when we will see that happening in India as well. I think health insurance industry has a huge communication problem. Okay, earlier, so even this the rising premium comes on top of better claim payments. Very clearly, I think visibly, the claim payment experience has clearly improved. I don't know why the health insurance industry is not publicizing the data relating to that. I mean, earlier cashless was unheard of. You could not get cashless. Now that is becoming standard, and hopefully it will become a large percentage, because cashless is the way that health insurance policies should work. And I think it is the past things about when insurance companies were trying to curtail costs by curtailing claims, that that is what is harming them today, because otherwise the rise in premium is an inevitable outcome of better claims experience, and which is,
Absolutely.
I think, what is happening. Clearly good things are happening in the health insurance industry,
Yeah.
and I think an inevitable consequence of that is going to be premium rise. And
Okay.
among the other things is of course that Sugam plan that people are talking about, the a
Right.
basic health plan,
Yeah.
again combined with a lot of other plans. I think we are going to see lots of developments in this. It is a huge
But
need,
till then,
but
because it's a very long way now to go. Till then, should we also have a medical emergency fund or a contingency fund that we are accumulating? Should treat it as your medical emergency fund? Is that the right way to go about now? Because you can't be depending on just your health insurance coverage, Harsh.
so, what is the implication of having a contingency fund? The implication is you put aside some money, and obviously, if it is a contingency fund, you will put it aside in a low risk type of an investment, which means it will be low return. Now, if you have plenty of funds, then you can put aside in contingency. But if you don't have, which is the situation with most of us, right? Then, putting aside something in contingency is not really an option, because what will you do? I
Totally.
mean, will you do contingency or will you
Yeah.
do other
Yeah.
goals? Matlab,
Yeah.
you have multiple goals to look at.
Yeah.
So,
True.
whilst it is good for me to say, ki, please have a contingency,
All right.
we have to also look at what are the client's other goals.
Sure. Sure.
Ideally, the contingency should be required only if you have if you have, say, a congenital disease which might lead to large claims, and which is not covered by the health insurance policy, or it's covered only partially.
Right.
Okay,
That is when you
that
really
kind
need
of
a
having
huge medical
contingency for
insurance. Yeah,
that
right.
is okay. But having contingency for normal medical expense that should be done by health insurance, I think is a failure of the system. And I
Okay.
think very clearly, till there is a healthcare regulator, okay, I think the insurance industry can do only so much. The
All right.
healthcare regulator
Sure.
clearly has to be there.
Sure. We have a lot of other aspects also to discuss on this matter, but then my time is up. Thank you so much, all three of you, for taking time out and helping our viewers understand the importance of having the right kind of health insurance, the right kind of coverage when it comes to health insurance, and also medical emergency fund. Thank you so much, all three of you. Let's take a quick break, and post that, let's address your portfolio queries with our expert.